Words are bridges.
शब्द सेतु हैं।
अल्फाज दिलों को और इंसानियत को जोड़ने का एक अजीम और तरीन पुल है।
വാക്കുകൾ പാലങ്ങളാണ്.
लफ्ज़ सरी कदलदारान
वहीनथुन
आखर हमार मेल सन आखर हमार जोड़
শব্দই সমন্বয়ৰ হেতু
Cocktail rock, yakraise.
Thuhi inkung kailasiam tu ani.
Ajrahana apati kisale.
Grauthaining yaukrai.
Shabda setu hun.
शब्दां दी सान।
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our festival co-directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple, festival producer Sanjoy Roy, and all of us at Teamwork Arts, I welcome you back to our online series, Words Are Bridges. Through this series, we aim to showcase the many languages and proud literary traditions of India. Our session today is Night in the Panther Skin. Natasha Lomouri and Bhupinder Aziz Parihar in conversation with Neeta Gupta. The Georgian epic Night in the Panther Skin follows the adventures of a young Hindostani prince, Tariel, as he searches for his beloved. This 12th century poem was written originally by poet Shota Rustavelli to impress his queen. Translated into Hindi by Bhupinder Aziz Parihar, this beautiful book is a tribute to the centuries-old friendship shared between Georgia and India. In this session, Parihar and Natasha Lomouri, director of the Writers' House in Tbilisi, discussed this recent Hindi translation and the fictional homecoming for the protagonist of the classic with publisher Neeta Gupta. Natasha Lomouri has been engaged in the field of art and literature since 2010 when she became director of the newly opened Writers' House, where she also coordinates the Tbilisi International Literature Festival and since last year manages promotion of Georgian literature abroad and support for its translation. The Writers' House, located in a beautiful historical building in the center of Tbilisi, runs a wide range of activities including international residencies. Bhupinder Aziz Parihar is an Urdu poet, translator, and editor. An academic, he has published and supervised publications of several books in Urdu and English. Ek Manzar Kaam and Thar Jai Koi Nagma are his collections of original Urdu poems. His translation works include Search of the Lost Home, Road to Self, Beyond Waters, Indian Society, Josh Malsiani, and many more. He's edited 12 novels of Urdu Alive, a biannual literary journal of Urdu in English. For the past 10 years, he's taught literary theory and modern linguistics to the postgraduate classes in Government College, Ludhiana. He's the recipient of the highest state literary awards, Shiromani Urdu Literature in 2003 and State Award of Literature in 2005. He was writer in residence in the UK and Germany in 2006 and in Mauritius for the World Urdu Conference. Neeta Gupta is the publisher at Yatra Books and a literary consultant with a special emphasis on translations. She's also the chief editor of Bharatiya Anuvad Parishad's quarterly journal on translation, Anuvad. She has been working towards creating publishing connectivities across different languages and cultures. She's edited a volume of essays on translating from and into Indian languages, Translating Bharat, Reading India. Before we move on to our session, we request you all to follow us on our handles GLF Lit Fest on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get notified on all our upcoming sessions. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. We now present Night in the Panther Skin, Natasha Lomouri and Bhupinder Aziz Parihar in conversation with Neeta Gupta.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Kritika, and hello and welcome to this session on the translation of this 12th century Georgian epic called The Night in the Panther Skin. The Night in the Panther Skin is the story of a Hindostani prince called Tariel who sets out in search of his beloved who has been abducted by sea pirates. He travels to Georgia via Arabia and makes friends with two handsome princes along the way, and the three of them eventually find his beautiful bride. So this is, it's one of those classic texts. It's forces of dark against the forces of light, and it's a timeless classic from Georgia, which has recently been and very effortlessly been translated by the well-known Urdu poet and translator Dr. Bhupinder Aziz Parihar, who's here with us today. And what's interesting is that since the hero of the epic is, the man in the panther skin, is from India, so in a way it is a fictional homecoming for the protagonist of this classic. So we're very excited to share this with you. But before we move on to the panel discussion, before we speak with our guest, Natasha Lomouri, who's here with us from Georgia, she heads the Writers' House in Georgia, in Tbilisi. I'd like to share some, special messages that we've received from His Excellency, the Ambassador of Georgia in India, and from the Director General of the ICCR. Let's listen to what they have to say.
Namaskar. I am delighted that ICCR is bringing out a translation of one of the epic poems of the country of Georgia by a renowned author, Mr. Shota Rustavelli. This poem, which used to be called Night in the Panther Skin, is being translated into Hindi, and in Hindi it will be called Sheer Ki Khal Wala Saman Shurveer. This is a brilliant poem by one of the greatest poets of Georgia, and it is seen as one of the cultural icons of Georgia. It's being translated into Hindi. When the ambassador of Georgia came to me to discuss this, I was delighted because this tells the story of a prince from India going to Georgia and his travels thereafter. It's a story of love, of fantasy, of fighting, of friendship, of enmity, everything that makes a happy story. And this is a story not only about all these issues, emotions that we can talk, but it's a story of the friendship between two nations. And so I'm delighted that we are doing this. We will be releasing this book soon. We've collaborated with Yatri Books to take it out. And I would like to thank not only Yatri Books, but I would also thank my friend, the Ambassador of Georgia, who is a great friend of mine, for this wonderful work that we're doing together. I wish all success. I'm sure this book will do well. We are looking forward to doing more translations of such books in the future. Thank you very much.
Dear friends, since my arrival to India in 2016, with a diplomatic mission to represent my country, Georgia, I was given fantastic opportunity to feel the essence of the Indian culture, while promoting cooperation based on common goals, mutual respect and understanding. Georgia has always maintained close trade and cultural links with India, a country of ancient cultures and traditions, the land of wisdom. This country has influenced the spiritual thinking process of the world, and it holds a special place in our hearts with its unique historical heritage, beautiful and diverse cultures. From my first day in India, I was motivated to bring to the Indian readers a feel of the essence of Georgian literature, an epic that has enshrined India in the mind of Georgians as a mythical country with high spirituality and a glorious past. I am delighted today that with the publication of the Hindi translation of this greatest and the most recognized masterpiece of the 12th century Georgian poetry, The Night in the Panther Skin, written by the eminent poet Shota Rustavelli, is now in the hands of the Indian readers. This book is a first ever Hindi translation. This poem is a collection of praises, wise sayings, aphorisms, and rich with creative images. Many of its phrases and quotes have become famous proverbs. It talks about dignity, love, friendship, courage. The poem, with its importance, universal, eternal values, crossed the national boundaries of Georgia. It gained a special place alongside some of the unique masterpieces of the world literature. We can describe the poem as a struggle between the forces of light and darkness. I take this opportunity to express my deep appreciation to all who took part in this important task and in the same time congratulate on the successful accomplishment of this historic project. I'm happy that I was introduced to the famous publisher Etra Books, Neeta Gupta, with whom we worked hard to bring this epic poem to the light. Famous Hindi and Urdu poet and translator, editor, professor of English language literature, Dr. Bhupinder Aziz Parihar, for his brilliant job. Mr. Onkar Fondekar for such a beautiful illustrations, and many others who took their part in achieving success of the project. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Jaipur Literature Festival directors, especially Namita Gokhale and Sanjay Roy, for giving us an opportunity to discuss this epic poem from Georgia in this session of Words Are Bridges. Thank you to everyone for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Your Excellencies. And so let's move on with our discussion. We have with us poet, translator, Bhupinder Aziz Parihar, and Natasha Lomouri from Tbilisi, who's joining us from Tbilisi. A huge welcome to both of you. You know, as the publisher, I feel fortunate as the publisher at Yatra Books, and I feel fortunate to have been able to bring this classic by Shota Rustavelli to Hindi readers in India. So, Natasha, before we begin, I'd love, you know, for you to share a little bit about the connection, the Georgia-India connection in this book, and also something about this, you know, elusive 12th century poet Shota Rustavelli, who we know so little about. I mean, we just know a little bit from the introduction, which was from the English translation that I have managed to get something online on Wikipedia. But I think, you know, as somebody who represents literature in Georgia, it would be wonderful to know a little bit more about Shota Rustavelli and this classic. So over to you, Natasha.
Thank you very much, first of all, for the opportunity to speak about this great event. It's really for Georgia, for the Georgian literature and for the literary tradition. I think it's one of the most central event that has happened with our literature during last years, because, of course, as you put it, it's a homecoming of the main actor of the poem back to India. So it's a special thing, and it's a pity that it has that this epic has been translated in so many languages, and finally it has not been translated in any of Indian languages, and that finally we have it in the language that probably deserves the most to have it in the original language. And for us, until today, Shota Rustavelli epic poem remains the central piece of the Georgian literature, even today. And for a country that has quite a long literary tradition, our first recorded written piece goes back to the 5th century. It's a big deal, of course, and it has been such a central book that until beginning of 20th century, maybe it has been given as a dowry to every woman that has been married, that was marrying, and of course many centuries people have been it has been many generations have known this by heart, the whole epic poem, and of course it has been handwritten for centuries, although our first today that we have the handwritten piece dates back to the 16th century, and then the first printed version of Night of this Panther skin goes back to 1712, so beginning of the 18th century. And there's no Georgian family that has not several copies of this book even today. So I prepared the one I have at home, the biggest one, and really the one of the most new publications. For example, one of them. So for us, we think that it is not only the it doesn't belong the epic only to Georgia. We think that it should be the part of the general the world literature tradition, because at least every educated person at least should have heard about this epic, if not read. So this is our ambition, and even though the area of what happens in the poem, it's quite big. It's India, it's Arabia. It depicts the golden age of Georgia. The 12th century was the golden age of Georgia. It depicts the rule of Queen Tamar, to whom the poem was dedicated, as we know. And of course, it's like the ode to chivalry, to love, to friendship. And so these are all the main values that still are very close to our heart in Georgian.
How lovely, it's wonderful. I would also like to bring in Dr. Aziz Parihar at this point. Dr. Parihar, would you tell us, because you described this when you first saw it, you described it as a grand narrative. So could you tell us a little bit about what motivated you and to translate this, and also, the kind of challenges that you face? In fact, it's a very big question I'm asking you, the kind of challenges and what you felt while translating, what you felt was gained or what was lost. And for our audiences, I'd like to tell them that, Dr. Parihar is fluent in, Urdu and Hindi, and, he also has a very good knowledge of Persian. And so when he was translating it, he's not just translated it into Hindi. This one translation that he shared with us, his original translation, can easily be transcribed into, I think, Arabic or Persian or Urdu or many languages. It's the kind of, the scope of that translation itself. We've only taken just the Hindi part for our Hindi readers, but it can easily be, also presented to Urdu readers or, people with a more interest in poetry or, So I think if you tell us a little bit, Aziz ji, about your translation process. It's a very huge question. I'm also putting whether, for you, what is translation? Is it a transcreation? Is it a creative recreation that you do out of a joy of playing with words? Tell us, just share with us, because it's incredible. And, the beauty and the speed with which you worked on this classic. I'd like you to share it with our
Thank you so much, Neetaji. This is so nice to be here with the learned minds. In fact, 2-3 things I would like to point out right here. You referred to the syncretic tradition of Europe and Asia. I had translated countless poems in mutual language pairs: Persian, Urdu, English, Punjabi, Hindi. So many books I had for NBT India, Sahitya Academy, other publishing houses. It was my dream, right, my formative years, to do something of extraordinary character. I was looking now for a grand narrative of fairy queen nature, you see. So when I got the script, I was excited that this was the volume I had been waiting for as translator my whole life. I found it an absolutely a composite, liberal, cosmopolitan text, a synthesis and amalgam of cultures, languages. You see, we as Indians, we in the Indian subcontinent, filtering down to our unconscious, we have 2 streams, major streams: Perso-Arabic and the Indo-Aryan languages, all the Khadi Bolis. All Indian languages, Indo-Aryan language on one hand in one stream, mixing with the Perso-Arabic traditions. So the Hindi we speak in a day-to-day life is not pure Hindi. There are Persian, Turkish, Arabic words. We so unwittingly speak these languages because they are a part of our collective unconscious. So I found these elements in this number 2, meta-narrative, syncretic tradition. You see, in the grand narrative, I found that it is so close to our day-to-day life. We always think in terms of stories, dreaming, aspiring, longing, fantasy, the spirit of wonder and adventure, to have an encounter with life. So this part of magical realism, particularly, the fable and the parable merging together. And I have a firm belief that all world literature is one, written in different languages. And translation is a cross-cultural activity. When we cut across the barriers of language, race, region, religion, culture, I think this is the function of translation, and translation of this kind of stupendous epic narrative is quite a fruitful exercise for me also, and for cultures too. It is an enrichment of cultures. Translation of this kind. I did countless thousands of short poems, but something I was aspiring for. And this gave me an opportunity. The second part, Madam Sahiba, Neeta ji, you talked about the challenges. For me, challenge is an opportunity. Yes. I know the art of converting challenge into an opportunity, because I am leading a retired life, more or less, a leisurely life, reading this and that and thinking most of the time. 6 hours doing some pen work, relaxing. The first challenge was the challenge of language and form. As Norman Holland in his essay, famous essay, Form as Defense, he says literary form should come to the writer or the translator as a defense after the translator has internalized the form. Only then it should come out. You see, an original poet is first translating his thoughts into words. He too is a translator in this sense. He's thinking in gold, but when he translates his thoughts into words on the paper, they are silver. You see, translation has always the habit of misbehaving. It misbehaves not only with the translator, it misbehaves with the original author too. Then I had to identify and empathize with the characters, situations in the epic, so that, you see, one crucial moot point here is, I was not translating into Hindi from direct Georgian language. It was already translated into English. Beautiful rendering. I am a student of English literature, poetry. I found the English translation not only beautiful and wonderful, but authentic. It doesn't have the conventional disciplined metrics. It uses prose also in a rhyming, speed, movement, instinctive rhythm, pacing, continuity of flow. So all these things are there in the English stanzas. You see, 1582 stanzas. You see, I marvel at the ingenuity of those translators. If they can do that, why can't I?
I would love it if you could read something. I think that would give it a little more heft, you know, to get
Oh, yes.
to make our audiences see the kind of beauty.
I have the pleasure, with your permission, to read out a few stanzas so you have a feel for the language. It's not a transcreation, in fact. Umar Khayyam, his rubaiyat are transcreated because in English the meter had to be maintained, adhered to. But here the English translators have taken liberty with the meters. Even prose is used there. Not only hexameter, pentameter, all those basic meters, they are taken liberty with. आफ्ता दिल ने आसमान की तरफ देखा और चलते जाते भक्ति में भाव से प्रार्थना की, हे आसमान के तेजस्वी सूरज, ताकतवरों में सबसे ताकतवर, जो दीनहीन का उद्धार करते हो, घमंडी के घमंड का दमन करते हो, मेरे दिन को रात न बनने दो, मुझे एक बार फिर उससे मिला दो। गुरु न्याय के वृहस्पति, अब सुनो मेरी प्रार्थना, विनती है मेरी, मेरे साथ न्याय करो ओ पारखी, मेरे दिल को सलाह दो, दिलासा दो मुझे, विकृत न करो अपने न्याय को, जानो परखो मुझे ठीक तौर से, मैं जो नेक सदाचारी हूँ, नए सिरे से मुझे घायल क्यों करना, जो पहले ही प्रेम और विरह की चोट खाए हुए है। सुनो हे रक्त रंजित मंगल, आओ अपने भाले के साथ और भेद डालो मुझे, मेरे जख्मों से रक्त धारा बहने दो, पुत जाने दो लहू की सुर्खी मेरी काया पर, कहो उससे हे प्रतिशोध के नक्षत्र, उसके बगैर मैं जो कुछ सहन कर रहा हूँ, तुम देख ही रहे हो मुझ पर क्या गुजर रही है, कैसे मेरा दिल हर तरह की खुशी से बेहीन हो चुका है। So toward the close of the epic, in the epilogue section, the poet says, अंत हुआ हमारे नायकों की कहानी का, खत्म हुआ किस्सा और गुजर गया एक सपने की तरह, वो सब इस दुनिया से जा चुके, ऐसा है समय का छल, वो इंसान जो सोचता है कि समय चिरकालीन है, समय उसके सामने से भी आंख झपकते गुजर जाता है। मैं रुस्तावेली, एक मैक्सियन, मैंने लिखी है जी साहस जोखिम भरी कहानी, मत करना भरोसा इस फरेबी दुनिया का, एक भ्रम है, धोखा है मुस्कुराहटें इसकी, गुजर जाता है नजारा इसका एक ही पल में, है इंसान बेकार है तुम्हारे सब प्रयास, किस्मत दे जाएगी धोखा तुम्हें, प्रसन्न है वो इंसान, मेहरबान है जिन पर, किस्मत बिखेरती है जिस पर मुस्कुराहटें अपनी।
वाह परिहर जी, बहुत खूबसूरत. Thank you so much. I'll just like to move on, taking this question, that the idea of this translation forward, and I do hope actually that this one translation into Hindi will lead to many other languages. Already a number of other language publishers have been writing to me, and they're keen to look at other translations into Indian languages. But Natasha, coming to you, I do hope that this translation marks the beginning of a new chapter, in the literary relations that Georgia and India share. And from your perspective, as as one of the as the head, as the director of the Writers' House, would you, is there an interest in Indian literature, literary traditions, fiction, non-fiction in Georgia as well? And how can we share more with, between our two countries, between our two nations?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for this beautiful reading, Dr. Parihar. Absolutely, and we thought and we talked about the the bridge language. Of course, it would have been much better if we did not have this bridge language, but it's on one hand, it's good that we have so many translations. We have 3 or 4 different versions of English translation. But slowly, probably we can move to the point where we start translating from directly. As the head of the Writers' House, we are of course taking care of having different direct connections with different countries. For this end, we have our literature festival, the International Literature Festival, which has been already the 6th year this year. So we hope that with me participating in Jaipur Literature Festival and getting new connections there, we can carry on this tradition and have some of the Indian poets and writers over here. We have a writers' residency also at Writers' House, so it's all, of course, will serve for these new connections. And recently we also, the Writers' House has incorporated the big translation program in it, so where we represent Georgia at different book fairs. So I hope that this all will serve for this future connections and bringing together these 2 countries and 2 cultures.
Lovely. You know, I want to also, you know, discuss with Dr. Parihar. Would you like to tell us the kind of audiences, you know, the kind of readers novel for a classic, for a text like this one in India? Because we were talking about it yesterday, and I was just wondering if we could, you know, you had some wonderful ideas of the kind of, you know, the outreach of a classic like this in India.
In our postmodern times, in fact, we have various kinds of readers. The common reader is always there, you see. First, this book will go to the common reader, people of all ages. Then in specific, scholars and researchers in cultural and literary studies, you see, Europe and Asia. So we have so many commonalities, similitudes among these cultures. And the scholars working in universities and colleges, particularly in the field of cultural studies, how cultures interact, how India and other cultures interacted in ancient time. You see, when this great poet wrote, it is the same period when Hazrat Amir Khusro was there. You see, in India, we had a Hazrat Amir Khusro, then the whole tradition went on. There in England, Shakespeare was there in 16th and 17th century. Then we had Ghalib in 19th century. So over there in ancient times, we have Dante and Homer, all these. They are relevant today. They are not redundant. They are relevant today. This epic, after 800 years, is relevant, speaks to us. When I was translating, it was speaking to me as a common reader, as a translator, as one who is delving deep into the characters and situations, because I have been a student of Greek drama, Elizabethan drama, French drama, and modern drama. So I have been a student of these areas. Then another important point, the scholars who are investigating the Indian aesthetics, particularly Bhartamuni, Anandvardhan, and others, who laid down the basic principles of Indian aesthetics, the principle of rasa, dhvani, phonetics, then auchitya, appropriateness, then vakrokti, stylistics. So I think these scholars who are working on Indian aesthetics in the light of the concept of rasa, pleasure. Aristotle calls it pleasure, aesthetic pleasure, spiritual pleasure, metaphysical pleasure, or pleasures of all kinds. And I find that all the 9 rasas are there in this epic.
True. Yes,
Chaure ras, Shringar ras, Krodh ras, all the rasas are there. So the scholars who are working on the rasa theory of Bhartamuni, Anandabardhan and others, those language philosophers, you see Noam Chomsky and Ferdinand de Saussure go back to Panini. Noam Chomsky's TG grammar, generative grammar, is entirely based on Ferdinand Saussure's grammar is based on Panini's Ashtadhyay. So I think this epic can be a catalyst in that direction.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful.
And last, the eternal theme of the conflict between good and evil.
Right.
From that divinity point of view, those working on the eternal conflict between good and evil, even they can get some insights when they investigate the epic deeply.
Right. So Natasha, coming to you, there was one question, you spoke about the relevance of this, particular text in the ancient times when, it was even given as every bride carried it in her trousseau. I wanted to talk about the relevance and the significance in these days. I mean, younger people today in Georgia and how they connect with this classic. You mentioned there was a latest edition where you had an animated version for younger readers, or so could you talk about that?
Yes, gladly, because this is probably the most important thing of the epic poem, that even though it dates back to the 12th century, it's absolutely modern. So I want to continue what the previous speaker said, that it's even today, we all relate to it. So I think this is the most significant, part of this masterpiece, that it's always reviving itself, and even in these postmodern times, it serves as inspiration for many people, for writers, poets, translators, even artists, even designers, because it's really a huge piece of work and it inspires everyone with its transcending values, its eternal values that the epic poem touches, as we talked about it. Yes, the love, and in these turbulent times where we always need, some place to turn to, with its beautiful values. It's always there. Whatever we go back and forth, we always turn to Night to the Panther Skin, to Rustavelli. I mentioned in the beginning when we were talking that we just had absolutely beautiful comics prepared on the of Night in the Panther Skin. So this means that this goes, so the interest of even younger generation now is of course spurred with these comic books, and it's absolutely wonderful. And it went on t-shirts, and it went on some bags, and so it's all getting modern. This is maybe the most important thing, and I'm sure that we will see many rebirths of this epic poem in the coming years. So this is probably the most important thing of today.
That was lovely. I'd love to see the cartoon, the animated versions. So thank you so much, Natasha, for joining us today. And thank you, Dr. Parihar, for being with us and sharing such wonderfully deep thoughts that you've had while translating this book. Thank you also to the wonderful team at the Jaipur Literature Festival for conceiving of a session, which the Words Are Bridges, this platform itself is dedicated to translations and focuses on translations of literatures from across the world, and special thanks to both Namita Gokhale and Sonjoy Roy, for whom translation is a very, very, it's very close to their heart. Languages, translation, discourses on these issues. So thank you to everyone at Jaipur Festival team. And I hope that this Hindi translation leads to many more Indian language translations around India. And most of a huge thanks to our audiences here. So thank you very much. And let's hope we get opportunities to meet again. So cheers and thank you very much.
Cheers. And I hope that this book, the new version of the new translation, will have a long life ahead, which it deserves, especially in India.
Thank you, Natalia, Bhupinder ji, and Neeta for that beautiful session. Thank you all for watching and being a lovely audience. If you've enjoyed this session, please do share with your friends and family and on your social media pages. We will be back next week with a new session on Jaipur Literature Festival's Words Are Bridges. Have a great evening.